Before the Hayabusa ever stormed across the headlines, there was already a queen of the asphalt. In 1990, Kawasaki unveiled a motorcycle so far ahead of its time that it didn't just win a race, it redefined what fast meant on the open road. This was the ZX-11, known to riders around the world as the ZX-1100, but in America, it wore a name that carried weight, the Kawasaki Ninja ZX-11. To understand the impact it made, you have to step back into the late 1980s. The motorcycle world was locked in what many riders called a Cold War of speed. Yamaha had its FZR 1000, Suzuki fielded the mighty GSXR 1100, and Honda put its pride in the CBR 1000F. Each claimed to be the sharpest blade, the king of acceleration, the fastest production bike money could buy. Magazines battled over dyno charts and top speed runs, while riders argued in parking lots and coffee shops about which brand had the real crown. But Kawasaki wasn't interested in polite competition. They didn't bring a chess piece to the board, they brought a sledgehammer. When the ZX-11 arrived, it wasn't an incremental step forward. It was a declaration, loud and clear, that Kawasaki intended to rewrite the rules. And for the next 6 years, no one could touch it. Kawasaki's bold move in 1990 wasn't just about attitude, it was about engineering. The ZX-11 didn't merely outrun its rivals, it carried hardware that no one else had dared to put on a street bike. At its heart was a 1,052 cubic centimeter inline-four, double overhead cams working the valves with precision, liquid cooling to keep the heat under control, and a level of refinement that felt almost futuristic for its time. But the true revolution wasn't in the displacement or the cylinder count. It was in the air. The ZX-11 became the first production motorcycle in the world to feature a ram air induction system. At highway speeds, ducts at the front of the fairing funneled pressurized air directly into the intake, creating a natural form of supercharging. The faster you rode, the more oxygen the engine swallowed, and the more power it delivered. Riders weren't used to that sensation, a bike that seemed to grow stronger the harder it was pushed. On paper, it made around 150 horsepower, but out on the interstate, that figure climbed even higher as the ram air effect kicked in. This wasn't some fragile racer tuned to the edge. Kawasaki paired the motor with a perimeter aluminum frame, giving it the rigidity needed to handle those speeds, while still offering stability that felt rock solid at triple-digit runs. The ZX-11 wasn't just designed to hit a number on a dyno, it was engineered to live comfortably at speeds that once belonged only to the racetrack. All that engineering translated into something riders could feel the moment they twisted the throttle. The ZX-11 wasn't just another fast motorcycle, it was the fastest production bike on Earth. Independent tests clocked it at a true 174 miles per hour, not inflated by optimistic speedometers or perfect tailwinds. That number stood untouched for 6 straight years, a lifetime in motorcycle terms. On America's long interstates, the ZX-11 felt like it had been bred for distance as much as speed. The aerodynamics wrapped the rider in a smooth pocket of air, and the engine surged with an endless well of torque. You could sit at 120, 130, even 150 miles per hour, and the bike felt steady, almost relaxed, like it was waiting for you to ask for more. Yet comfort wasn't sacrificed. Unlike razor-edged sport bikes that cramped your wrists and folded you into a race crouch, the Ninja's ergonomics were surprisingly humane. Riders could strap on a backpack, even carry a passenger, and still devour hundreds of miles in a day. It was a missile, yes, but one with enough civility to double as a long-distance tourer. Of course, the sheer speed changed the game on the highway. Rivals like the GSXR 1100 or Honda's CBR 1000F, quick as they were, suddenly looked ordinary in the ZX-11's mirrors. Passing them wasn't a contest, it was a disappearing act. One moment they were there, the next they were specks fading behind. For riders lucky enough to command it, the ZX-11 delivered not just performance, but the intoxicating thrill of ruling the open road. For all its glory on the open road, the ZX-11 was more than a one-dimensional rocket. Kawasaki had built a machine that could balance speed with surprising usability. Its aluminum perimeter frame gave it the rigidity needed for stability at triple-digit speeds, while the aerodynamic fairing sliced cleanly through the wind. Out on straight highways, it felt untouchable, smooth, planted, and steady, even when the scenery blurred into a tunnel. Comfort was another unexpected strength. The seat was broad enough for long hauls, and the riding position didn't fold you into knots after an hour in the saddle. For riders who wanted to tour at a brisk pace, the ZX-11 offered the rare combination of superbike power with grand touring manners. You could chase horizons all day without feeling like you'd gone 12 rounds in the ring. But the Ninja wasn't without flaws, and they became apparent when the road began to twist. At nearly 600 pounds wet, agility was not its calling card. In tight corners, the weight made itself known, demanding a firm hand and plenty of experience. It could carve, but it never danced the way a lighter sport bike did. And without electronic safety nets, no traction control, no ABS, the ZX-11 was as honest as a machine could be. Every mistake belonged to the rider, and the bike was quick to punish overconfidence. It was a motorcycle that rewarded skill and respect, but it offered no mercy for recklessness. In that sense, its greatest strength, raw, unfiltered power, was also its most dangerous weakness. Kawasaki knew the ZX-11 was a monster, but they also knew even monsters could be refined. Over its production run, the bike received a series of thoughtful upgrades, subtle changes that didn't alter its soul, but polished it into a more complete package. Suspension came first. Riders who pushed the Ninja hard reported that early models could feel a bit unsettled under heavy braking or in long, fast sweepers. Kawasaki answered by giving the forks and shock-adjustable compression and rebound damping. The result was a chassis that stayed more composed at speed, letting the rider trust the bike even as the speedometer crept higher. Brakes were another priority. Stopping a 600-pound machine traveling at 150 miles per hour demanded serious hardware. Kawasaki upgraded the calipers and added ventilated discs that could better withstand heat and repeated punishment. It wasn't race bike sharp, but it provided the confidence riders needed when slowing from Autobahn speeds. Cooling and durability also saw improvements. A larger radiator and revised airflow paths helped keep engine temperatures stable, especially during sustained high-speed runs in hot weather. The engine itself, still displacing 1,052 cubic centimeters, was fine-tuned internally for smoother power delivery and better efficiency without losing its brutal punch. Even the aerodynamics received attention. Slimmer, more sculpted fairings reduced drag and gave the ZX-11 a cleaner silhouette. It wasn't flashy, more like a heavyweight fighter slipping into a tailored suit. You could still see the muscle beneath, but now it carried itself with a touch of refinement. For 6 straight years, the ZX-11 sat unchallenged at the top of the speed charts. But in the mid-1990s, the competition was sharpening its knives. By 1996, Honda stepped into the arena with a machine built for one purpose: dethroning Kawasaki's king. That bike was the CBR-1100XX Super Blackbird. With 1,137 cubic centimeters on tap, smoother aerodynamics, and Honda's trademark polish, the Blackbird edged past the Ninja's top speed. It was only by a few miles per hour, but in the world of hyperspeed bragging rights, that was enough to claim the crown. Honda's victory, however, was short-lived. In 1999, Suzuki arrived with a motorcycle that didn't just win the war, it escalated it to a whole new level. The GSX-1300R Hayabusa unleashed over 175 horsepower and ripped through the speed traps at a verified 194 miles per hour. For the first time, 300 kilometers per hour wasn't just a magazine myth. It was a reality. The hyperbike era had officially exploded. That sudden leap triggered alarm bells worldwide. Governments, insurers, and safety advocates worried about production motorcycles capable of such velocity. By 2000, the major Japanese manufacturers quietly agreed to an informal truce, electronically limiting their machines to 186 miles per hour. The age of unregulated speed was over. Yet history is clear. None of it would have happened without the ZX-11. Kawasaki's Thunderbolt was the spark that ignited the arms race, the benchmark every rival chased. It proved that top speed could sell motorcycles, and it forced the industry to redefine what fastest really meant. Looking back, the ZX-11 was far more than just the fastest motorcycle of its day. It became the line in the sand that separated the fast from the impossible. Before 1990, riders asked simple questions. How quick, how powerful, how fast off the line? After the ZX-11, the questions grew heavier. How much could a rider truly control? How much nerve did it take to command a machine built to cruise comfortably at 150 miles per hour? In that sense, the Ninja wasn't only about performance, it was about responsibility. With no traction control, no ABS, and no electronic lifelines, the ZX-11 demanded respect. Every twist of the throttle was a pact between man and machine. Push too far, and physics would remind you of the cost. Ride it well, and you experienced something few bikes could ever deliver: the raw essence of speed, unfiltered and unforgettable. The ZX-11's legacy lives on in every hyperbike that followed. Without it, there would have been no Blackbird, no Hayabusa, no ZX-12R, or ZX-14R. It was the atom of speed's original sin, the motorcycle that forced the world to acknowledge just how far manufacturers were willing to go. Today, spotting one on the street feels almost surreal, like seeing a Cold War fighter jet parked in a suburban driveway. Out of its time, out of its place, but still commanding awe. It remains a rolling reminder of when brands dreamed without limits and riders dared to keep up. The Kawasaki ZX-11 was more than a motorcycle. It was a statement. It told the world that speed had no ceiling, that limits were meant to be shattered, and that riders who dared could touch the edge of the impossible. For 6 years it reigned, and decades later it still commands respect, not just for what it achieved, but for what it inspired. Seeing a ZX-11 today is like catching sight of a veteran in uniform. Out of place, perhaps, but carrying the weight of history on its shoulders. It reminds us of a time when engineers chased dreams and riders chased horizons. How about you? Do you remember the first time you saw a ZX-11 roar past on the highway? Share your memories in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to like and subscribe, so you'll never miss our next ride through motorcycle history.